All right, we continue talking about selection structures. We're moving on to if-else statements. So we're being a little bit more sophisticated in decision making. This is when you have two choices. You have a test condition. If this test condition is true, you'll do something. If it's false, you'll do something else. So you specify what you want to do if it is false. And then, of course, your program merges at the end. So sort of in real life, for example, if you say if it rains, you'll do something. So for example, you would take an umbrella. Okay, so you say if it rains, I'll take an umbrella, and you don't really care what happens if this is false. So it's basically a bit of a logic class. So if you don't care what happens if this is false, so if it's true, you're going to take an umbrella. If it's false, there's no action to be taken. So you only have an if state. But if there's an action to be taken, a specific action, if this is false, then you would have an else. So you say, if it rains, I'll take my umbrella. Else, that means in an event that it doesn't rain, you are going to, let's say, take soccer shoes. So take your soccer shoes if it's not raining. So in this case, you're saying if this happens, this is what I'll do. Else, so no matter what happens, I'll take soccer shoes. So in this argument, even if it snows, you have to take your soccer shoes, right? Because it says else. No matter what condition, if it doesn't rain, I'm going to take my soccer shoes. That's basically what else means. Like in all other conditions. It so happens that most people, when they use else, they don't think of all possible outcomes, which is the same as this case. But that's basically how if and else conditions work. So it's basically a two-way decision structure. So we're going to have the test condition. It's going to have a condition. Notice that else does not have a test condition. So else just doesn't have a condition. It basically says, if this is the case, then we do this. Else, we don't care what the condition is. Else, we're doing this, right? So it covers all other cases. Do you have to have an else? So what happens if there's nothing to do in the else branch? Then just don't have it, right? You don't absolutely have to have an else. If you need it, you put it in. If you don't need an else, then you simply don't include it. Let's see an example. So here we say if price is 56, so I'll draw it up here. So price is 56.00, and this is setup. You say if price is greater than 40, it's too expensive, else let's buy it. In this case, what would be the output? Price is greater than 40. So we're going to have an output that is, it's too expensive. So the output would be, it's too expensive. This would be written to the council. Now notice that because there's only one executable in the if block, so this is the if block. Let me actually erase this. So this is the if block. This over here is the else block. And since there is only one one statement in each block, we can get away with not putting the braces here, right? One thing that you have to know about the else, so you could have an if on its own, so you could have if something and then not having it followed by an else. You can never have an else on its own, right? Even when you speak in English, you would never just use an else. You won't just say, else I do this. So you need an if, then you need an else. So you first of all, you never have an else on its own. Second of all, else doesn't have a condition. So if something, you have the body of the if, then else, then you have the body of the else. And here, no condition for the else. It's just basically on its own. Let's look at this problem. So this is a problem with duplicating code. So if you have if floor is greater than 13, so assume we have declared a couple of variables here already. So let's say we have int floor. Let's say we set it to 20, and then there's another variable. Let's say if we have int actual floor, let's say we have that equal to 0. So assume that this comes before this code. What happens is so you have two cases. You have a case that floor is greater than 13, and then you have all other cases. So if floor is 13 or lower than 13, this would become your condition. And this code is not taking care of the negative case. So there is that logical problem associated with this. But what problem do you see? So you see that this code and this code, so you see the print statement is happening twice. You're using it one inside the if and then once inside the else, where it's absolutely identical. So what you could do is you could ask yourself, do you need both these lines? Because the problem is, if you have too much code that you're repeating, it's going to be hard to maintain. The more code you have, the more you have to read, the more you have to maintain. So if you want to change something in your code, when you have a lot of code written, it's going to be more difficult to upkeep. So you try to remove duplication. So what could you do to duplicate? To remove duplication here. So let me pause the video and think about that for a second. So hopefully you paused and now you're back. What you could do is we could do this. We could basically remove the print statement from both branches, because the branches, they don't really need the print statement, they just need to do the calculations. So you do one calculation in the case that floor is greater than 13, and then another calculation in all other cases. So the print doesn't need to be in the branches in this particular case. So we bring it out and we simply have it out here. So no matter what the outcome, no matter what you calculated, you simply print it out. So that becomes, like a little flow chart that we had before.